Hannibal's War by Livy. This is a book summary. Imagine standing on the battlefield, facing the greatest military strategist of all time. A man who crossed the Alps with war elephants, outwitted Rome's finest, and nearly brought the Republic to its knees. This is the story of Hannibal Barca. Welcome to Hannibal's War, a tale of genius, ambition, and relentless warfare. Get ready to dive into the epic struggle between Rome and Carthage, as told by the legendary historian Livy. Section 1. The Rising Storm. In the 3rd century BCE, Rome was a rising superpower. But across the Mediterranean, the Carthaginians were no pushovers. These two republics had already clashed once in the First Punic War, a brutal naval conflict that ended with Rome taking control of Sicily. But Carthage wasn't done. No, their comeback was about to be led by a young general, Hannibal Barca. At just 26, Hannibal took command in Spain, a land of wealth and warriors. He wasn't just any leader, he was a prodigy of war, shaped by fire and vengeance. His father, Hamilcar, had once made him swear a sacred oath, never be a friend to Rome. Hannibal was ready. But instead of striking Rome directly, he did the impossible. He led his army across the frigid, treacherous Alps with 50,000 men, 9,000 cavalry, and war elephants. It was a gamble that could either make or break him. Section 2. The war unfolds. Hannibal's unstoppable momentum. Epic war drums. The sound of marching soldiers. A distant war horn echoes through the valleys of Italy. Rome was caught off guard. They had underestimated him. The Senate had laughed at the idea that a Carthaginian general could pose a real threat to the might of Rome. But Hannibal was no ordinary general. He had crossed the Alps, defied nature itself, and emerged into Italy with an army hardened by suffering, forged in fire. He had fewer troops, but what he lacked in numbers, he made up for with pure tactical brilliance. In battle after battle, he humiliated Rome, reducing their mighty legions to nothing but bodies on the battlefield. Hannibal's first major test in Italy came at the Trebia River, where he faced a Roman army under the proud and reckless consul Tiberius Sempronius Longus. Eager for glory, Sempronius ignored every warning. He led his men across the freezing river, believing he was about to crush Hannibal in open battle. But Hannibal had already won this fight before it even began. As the Romans stumbled onto the battlefield, drenched and shivering from the icy water, they were met by Hannibal's cavalry and elite Numidian horsemen. But the true horror was yet to come. Hidden in the woods, Hannibal's ambush force, silent, waiting, struck from behind. In moments, the Romans were caught in a brutal pincer attack. They had no time to react. The Carthaginian army slaughtered them mercilessly. The once mighty Roman legions broke. The survivors fled, leaving thousands to die on the frozen battlefield. Rome was in shock. Their army had been humiliated. But the worst was yet to come. The following year, the Romans sent another army, this time under the command of Gaius Flaminius. But Hannibal knew his enemy. He understood the arrogance of Roman commanders, the way they rushed headlong into battle, thinking sheer numbers would carry them to victory. And so, he led them into a trap so devastating that it would be remembered for centuries to come. The Roman army marched blindly into the valley, the thick morning fog concealing what lay ahead. Suddenly, an explosion of sound. Trumpets. War cries. Hannibal's army erupted from the hills, descending upon the Romans from every side. There was no warning, no chance to form ranks. It was not a battle. It was a slaughter. Hannibal's men cut them down where they stood. Thousands died without even drawing their swords. So complete was the ambush that Flaminius himself was slain in the chaos. Rome had lost yet another army. Rome had never suffered such a disaster. The Republic was shaken, and yet Hannibal was just getting started. The battle that broke Rome. Cannae. This was Hannibal's masterpiece. The Romans, determined to end the war once and for all, gathered the largest army in their history, nearly 80,000 men, double Hannibal's numbers. 2 consuls led them, convinced that sheer force alone would crush the Carthaginian menace. But Hannibal did not fear numbers. He did not fear Rome's might. He welcomed it. Hannibal formed his army into a crescent, a seemingly weak center designed to lure the Romans in. And just as he predicted, the Romans surged forward, pressing into his ranks, eager to break through. It was exactly what he wanted. As they pushed deeper, the crescent curved inward, swallowing them whole. Suddenly, his cavalry struck the Roman flanks. Then his seasoned African veterans, hidden on the sides, closed the trap. The Romans were surrounded. It was the perfect encirclement. There was no escape, no retreat, no mercy. The Roman army was annihilated. Over 50,000 men were slaughtered in a single day, their bodies piling so high that Livy describes the battlefield as a sea of blood and death. Consul Aemilius Paulus was slain. Senators, noblemen, Rome's elite, wiped out in one decisive stroke. It was the worst defeat in Rome's history. The Republic teetered on the edge of collapse. For the first time, Rome felt fear. They had never known an enemy like this. Some in the Senate whispered the unthinkable. Perhaps it was time to negotiate. Perhaps Rome should surrender. But Rome does not surrender. No matter the cost, no matter the bloodshed, they would fight on. Because if they didn't, Hannibal would bring the Republic to its knees. Rome's fight back and the turning point. The once mighty Rome stood on the edge of destruction. 3 armies lost, over 100,000 dead, their allies abandoning them, and Hannibal unstoppable, marching through their lands. Many feared it was time to negotiate, to plead for mercy. But Rome did not surrender. Rome did not kneel. One man had a vision. Quintus Fabius Maximus knew that Rome could not defeat Hannibal in open battle. He had seen too many legions cut down, too many proud Roman commanders fall to their own arrogance. So he devised a strategy that went against everything Rome stood for. Patience. Avoid battle. Harass the enemy. Starve them. Bleed them dry. Hannibal, for the first time, was on the defensive. Rome, battered but unbroken, had found its way to fight back. But Rome needed more than just survival. It needed victory. And that victory would come from a young, untested commander, Publius Cornelius Scipio. He was only 25, but he had studied Hannibal's tactics. He had learned from Rome's failures. And he was about to give Carthage a war they never expected. Scipio's campaign in Spain was nothing short of brilliant. In a single daring move, he took the Carthaginian stronghold of New Carthage, severing their supply lines. One by one, the Carthaginians lost ground. Hannibal's power began to crumble. Then came the message Hannibal had feared. Carthage was under attack. Rome had turned the tide. The war was no longer in Italy. It was on his doorstep. The final battle, Zama, the inevitable happened, the final confrontation between the 2 greatest generals of their time, Scipio and Hannibal, Rome and Carthage. Hannibal, despite everything, was still a force to be reckoned with. He had one last gamble, war elephants, his signature weapon, the same beasts that had terrorized Rome. But Scipio had prepared. With the elephants neutralized, Scipio pressed forward. His cavalry encircled Hannibal's forces, just as Hannibal had done at Cannae. The trap was set. The Carthaginian army was crushed. For the first time, Hannibal tasted defeat. Carthage was crushed, forced to surrender, stripped of its empire, forbidden to ever raise an army without Roman permission. The once great city was now nothing more than a shadow of its former self. Hannibal, now a fugitive, moving from city to city, always pursued by Rome. As for Hannibal, he became a hunted man. Rome never forgot, never forgave. For years, he fled, seeking refuge in foreign courts, always watching his back. Until the Romans closed in. rather than fall into their hands, Hannibal took his own life, his final act of defiance. A cup of poison drops from his hands. Silence. The legend ends. Hannibal's war was more than just a military conflict. It was a battle of minds, strategies, and endurance. He was Rome's greatest nightmare, the one general who came closer than any other to its destruction. His tactics are still studied in military academies today. The Battle of Cannae remains a masterclass in warfare. His name? Immortal. But what if Hannibal had won? What if Rome had fallen that day at Cannae? Would the world we know today even exist? Would history itself have been rewritten? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching.